We hear daily now about Israel's war in Gaza, and Americans also can easily keep track of what's going on with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we've certainly been keeping you updated on those conflicts. But tonight, we also want to shine a spotlight on a forgotten crisis, one of many that slip under the radar. Tonight, we're talking about Sudan. The African country has been torn apart by years of instability and now is in the midst of a brutal civil war between rival militaries. Much of the suffering happening in the western region of Darfur, which has a painful history of ethnic cleansing.
Big sound of shot and gun, and they have more people. They say she and my grandmother, they are killing them.
That's just one child now living in a camp for displaced people, talking about the terrors she and her family endured. UNICEF says as many as 700,000 children in Sudan face starvation. International correspondent Naba Muhyiddin is in Sudan for us with more about a conflict that seems to have no end in sight.
It's been 10 months since war broke out in Sudan between the army and the paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces. More than 12,000 people have been killed in the fighting, which has triggered the world's largest displacement of people. About 10.7 million people are now displaced in Sudan by this and previous conflicts. Some 9 million people have moved inside the country, and more than 1 million fled to neighboring countries, including Chad, Egypt, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. The war and a deteriorated economy have contributed to a hunger crisis, where 25 million people now are in need of food aid, according to the World Food Programme. Health services, the education system, telecommunications, and banking have been hit hard, and the fierce clashes that now covers 60% of the territory of Sudan have damaged the country's infrastructure. Many countries, including the United States and Saudi Arabia, have tried to bring Sudan's warring generals to the negotiation table. All of the mediation initiatives to stop the war have failed so far. The conflict has spread to new regions, and fears are growing of foreign intervention from the United States, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, and some Arab countries, especially in the Red Sea region. There are concerns that Sudan could slide into a prolonged conflict and undefined future. Naba Muhyiddin, Scripps News, Sudan.
Here with us to discuss the crisis in Sudan is Michelle Nunn. She's the president and CEO of CARE USA, a major international humanitarian agency. Michelle, good to have you. CARE has been working in Sudan since 1979. What's the biggest need there right now?
Well, the biggest need is for the conflict to end. And so we need to advocate for the world, for the UN Security Council, for all of the players to ensure that we can have a ceasefire. And then we need to ensure that we can get food and water and health care to those who need it. Your correspondent so well articulated, we have 25 million people that are in need of humanitarian assistance. And we have, for instance, 700,000 children that are on the brink of starvation and potentially death. So we have to have peace, and then we have to have the provision of aid to get to those who need it so badly right now.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out here, world's largest displacement of people, but this issue doesn't seem to get a lot of attention in the daily, weekly news cycle. A UNICEF spokesperson visited a community devastated by fighting recently. Here's just a little bit of what he had to say.
Buildings have been burnt out, they've been ransacked. This is people's homes. And they've either been killed or they've had to flee. It's got to stop. It's just maddening. It's saddening.
Michelle, what is your reaction when you hear accounts like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific. And I mean, you can see from what James said and from the visceral evidence that he's seen of the devastation. We've heard about the statistics of the death. This is the largest displacement crisis that the world faces right now, and yet it's getting so little attention. And when I think about the individual stories, because each one of those numbers that we talk about, the 25 million people, is an individual story, family and a community. But I think we also need to recognize that we can do something about this. I was just hearing a story of one of our colleagues told me about a woman named Fatima. She's a mother of 5. She's in her 30s. She did not have enough food to be able to nourish her own body, enough to be able to breastfeed her baby, but she had to brave all sorts of conflict and literally put her life on the line in order to get assistance. But we were able to get her assistance when she was able to reach the medical clinic. And her daughter now is eating 3 meals a day and is on the road to recovery and to being able to even gain weight. So I think it's important when we look at these incredible pictures, the numbers of despair, that we also realize that we can take action and that we can make a difference and that we can save lives.
Michelle, aside from the conflict itself, what are the biggest challenges to getting food and supplies and other relief to the people of Sudan to, curb the starvation crisis that's happening there?
Well, the biggest challenge is the conflict itself. And after that, it's also resources. We've talked about the fact that this has not received the kind of attention that crisis at this magnitude should be receiving. And so, for instance, last year, only 40% of the resources that were needed reached the people of Sudan. And right now, in the first part of this year, literally a fraction, 1 to 3 to 4% of the total resources are arriving. So we need resources, we need peace, and we need a mobilization campaign to ensure that the people of Sudan have the capacity to, again, have the food, have the water, have basic health care, and then are ultimately able to return to their homes and to have their lives restored.
Michelle, before we let you go, if more waves of refugees wind up heading beyond Sudan's neighboring countries and try to go to Europe, is there help waiting for them there? And do they face more hardships with the last 30 seconds we have left?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing that countries like Chad or South Sudan, the neighboring countries, are absorbing these refugees. These are already countries that have been living and oftentimes are in need of humanitarian assistance themselves. And so we do not have right now a global system to accommodate the refugee flow that is coming from Sudan. So we need to ensure that we activate and mobilize the global community for peace, and that we're able to reach and support people to continue to build their lives in Sudan, and then to also have the capacity to flee when necessary and to support those refugees as is needed, both in the surrounding countries and in their migration path.
Yeah. Michelle Nunn with CARE USA, many thanks for your time. And for the folks at home, we'll be right back.